All right, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Mary Leslie. I'm president of the Los Angeles Business Council. Today we have over 200 participants registered and joining us for our LABC webinar on COVID-19 and safe voting in the November election, featuring California's Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. It is the fourth webinar. Thank you for being with us, Secretary. It's our fourth webinar in a series. We had Maxine Waters, chair of the powerful House Financial Services Committee about housing and homeless. We had California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara talk to us about, business insurance issues. We had LA City Councilman Paul Krikorian talk to us about the budget, which is quite important. If you missed any of these, feel free to go to our website, check it out. They're all there for you. But today we're honored to have Alex Padilla, California Secretary of State and Chief Elections Officer. This webinar is timely as we know we're over or just under 100 days from the 2020 presidential election, one that's expected to be one of the most polarized or politicized elections in modern history. As COVID-19 cases continue to rapidly increase across the nation, the debate rages on how to hold the elections in an effective and safe way. This has given rise to some controversy about things pitting in-person voting against mail-in voting, and questions now arise about how each state should handle the process on November 3rd. The California Voters' Choice Act, which passed in 2015, made it easier for Californians to vote early and in more diverse locations. The new law requires election officials, or the new action of the state secretary requires election officials to mail a ballot to every registered voter in the state as a precaution for potential in-voting exposure to COVID-19. Today, Secretary Padilla will address these issues and how he has created an equitable, safe voting system for us here in California. As Secretary of State, he has created a new program called Democracy at Work program, which encourages voting and civic engagement among businesses, nonprofit organizations, and government agency employees. He also serves in a leadership role with the nonpartisan National Association of Secretaries of State, which he has just took a break from this very day to be with us. He serves on the committees for elections, business services, cybersecurity, state heritage, and international relations. And before I introduce the secretary, I just like to run over a few housekeeping items. At the end of the secretary's presentation, we'll have a Q&A. I encourage all participants joining us today to submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. It is now my pleasure to introduce the secretary, who has been a champion for voter registration since he took office in 2015. Before being elected Secretary of State, Secretary Padilla served on the LA City Council, becoming one of its youngest council presidents, or the youngest council president, and the first Latino president in 2001. And during his tenure, helped negotiate LA Live and LAX modernization. He is born in Pacoima. He has served as a strong representative of Southern California in state politics for many years. As state senator, where we worked with him on sustainability issues when he served as the chair of the Senate Committee on Energy, Utility, and Communications. He's our friend. We're thrilled that he's in Sacramento, and we're thrilled that he's in charge of the elections coming up. So without further ado, Secretary Padilla.
Great, thank you, Leslie. First and foremost, since we're despite how many Zooms we've done, we got to do a tech check. Can you see me and hear me okay? Get a thumbs up?
Yeah.
All right, we're connected. Well, thank you for the introduction and frankly for your years and years of friendship. Recall fondly my early days at City Hall when we first met, and we've been working together ever since, both at the city level, my time in the legislature, and believe it or not, yes, now even in my capacity as Secretary of State. One minor correction, I'm not in Sacramento. My main office is in Sacramento, but home is still Los Angeles. Still live here in the San Fernando Valley. It's where we've chosen to raise our three boys. We try to say we're trying to raise three gentlemen in this day and age. Thank you for giving me this timely opportunity to share what we're working on as it pertains to elections with the LA Business Council membership. First, let me create a little bit of context, and then I'll share some information I think that's important for everybody to know as voters, and then come to more specifically opportunities as business leaders and what you can do to help us in Los Angeles County and throughout the region, because we are going to need your help for this November. First, the context setting. When I first ran for Secretary of State, it was primarily on an agenda of trying to increase registration rates, trying to increase turnout rates, right? The measure of our democracy is based on how many people are participating. At least that's what I was taught in high school government class. Yeah. And unfortunately, California was not at the top of the class when it came to those metrics. So I came into office with some pretty good ideas, I thought, on increasing registration through not just online registration, but automatic registration and allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote, that sort of thing. And, we had ideas on how to increase turnout by making it easier for people by providing more secure and convenient options, expanding vote by mail, introducing real in-person early voting options in California, where we really hadn't seen that in the past. And now, as you mentioned, with the Voters' Choice Act, in counties that have adopted the VCA, which includes Los Angeles and Orange counties, giving voters the flexibility of voting at any location in the county convenient to them over the course of several days, not just election day, if they didn't vote by mail to begin with, as easy and convenient as that has become. And so I share all that because the March 3rd primary election, remember we moved our primary up early this year, showed us a couple of things. Registration set another record. We were at about 20.6 million registered voters on the rolls, a nearly 3.25 million voter increase since my swearing in as Secretary of State, so very proud of that. But it's not just registration that has surged, it was also turnout. We set a record, more ballots cast in the 2020 primary than in any primary in California history. And so just by those metrics alone, we know that the state of our democracy is strong, if you will, and that reforms like the Voters' Choice Act is working. 13 of the 15 Voters' Choice Act counties in the state exceeded their record statewide turnout rate. Los Angeles County didn't, but still significantly surpassed the 2016 primary turnout. So we know these reforms are working, not just from a security standpoint, but from a voter accessibility standpoint. So I share all that because, prior to the impact of COVID, we were really in a good place. And I think by and large, we still are. But when COVID began to have its impact, not just on people's health, not just on the economy, but in all aspects of our lives, we quickly pulled together several stakeholders, including advocates and business leaders, together with legislative representatives, the governor's office, county elections officials, to begin to have a dialogue about how we will approach the November election, because there will be a November presidential general election. It's not a matter of if, it's not a matter of when, it's just a matter of how we can do so in a way that's accessible, secure, and now given COVID, safe and healthy for everybody involved, for voters and poll workers alike. And it turned out that a lot of the policies that we've been championing to increase access to the ballot make even more sense during a health pandemic, right? There's no safer way to register to vote or to update your registration than online. So spread the word, registertovote.ca.gov. If you're already registered, you're gonna hear us promoting verifying your registration status to make sure your information, especially your address, is current at voterstatus.ca.gov. I'm going to be throwing out a lot of tools and links here, but you can find them all at vote.ca.gov. Maybe we should add that into the chat box here for people to copy and bookmark. But a lot of tools we're going to make available. On the registration side, like I said, it's easiest to do it that way, and we continue to see the benefits of automatic registration instead of a dip in registration because of COVID. As we've seen in other states, we actually continue to see an increase. As of last Friday, we're at about 20.8 million registered voters on the rolls. So we're going to surpass 21 before November. So that bodes well for us, because I think the interest and certainly the importance of voting this November is still absolutely there, if not more so. But registration, as we know, is only half the battle. Just because people are registered doesn't mean that everybody turns out. And so what can we do to continue to make voting as accessible, secure, and safe as possible? Well, between two executive orders by Governor Newsom and subsequent action by the legislature, here's what the November election is going to look like. And so I'm sharing this with all of you because I know we have some very high propensity voters here. For those of you who vote by mail, probably not going to see much of a difference. But for those of you who don't always vote by mail, or who haven't voted by mail because you're like me and enjoy going in person on election day, it is going to be different. First of all, everybody in California, every registered voter in California will receive a mail-in ballot in advance of the election. So as we stand here today, 105 days till election day, let's subtract 29. It's going to be 74 days, did I do the math right? Until ballots are in mailboxes. So, you know, the first and foremost way we're going to encourage people to vote is to do it by mail. In case you're wondering about stamps and how many to put on the envelope, don't need to worry. No stamps, no problem. Return postage is prepaid. The envelope that comes with your ballot will have postage prepaid, so you don't have to worry about that. We've also introduced a new tool. Again, you'll find information at vote.ca.gov. It's a ballot tracking system. So voters can sign up to receive text message alerts, email alerts, or even automated calls, giving them the status of their ballot every step of the way through the Postal Service delivery process, kind of like tracking your UPS package when you shop online. And imagine that, getting a notification that your ballot was received and counted by the county. Great for transparency, great for public confidence in the system, and great for accountability on all fronts. But we know that California is a large and diverse state with a large and diverse electorate, and there's a lot of people who may need to vote in person, whether it's because of an accessibility concern or they need some sort of assistance, language, for example, or need to replace their ballot if they lost it, or for whatever reason. People deserve to have that in-person option. And so we're working feverishly to make sure that we maintain as many in-person, safe voting opportunities both on and before Election Day for people who need that. So again, in Los Angeles and Orange counties, it's going to be that vote center model where anybody can go anywhere, maybe not quite over the course of 11 days, but at a minimum over the course of 4 days. So as voters, those are the general items you need to be aware of. But let me now talk about democracy at work, because here really is where business leaders can be very, very helpful. As you can imagine, COVID has impacted the elections world as well, not just government, not just folks who are in business, but the elections world. For starters, voting locations. A lot of locations that we've used in the past that may not make sense anymore. Think retirement homes and residential garages. And frankly, a lot of poll workers who have helped us in prior elections that are not going to be available this year. All those well-meaning seniors and retirees are the ones that medical experts most encourage to stay home because of the pandemic. So we're broadening a program in our office that we've called Democracy at Work to include poll worker recruitment and voting location recommendations as well. You know, this Democracy at Work program we've had for several years, where we've partnered with employers, both public and private sector, but primarily private sector, to help disseminate on a nonpartisan basis information about voter registration, for example, you know, the online link and reminders before the deadline, or even don't forget to vote information, right? How to find your polling place and those sorts of things. But given the challenges of recruiting a new generation of poll workers and finding a lot of replacement locations, we need smarter locations to conduct the voting. This is where we're asking for your help. Help us spread the word. If through your networks, whether it's employees or customers or members or all of the above, you have recommendations to make of where would be a good voting location. The county is all ears, and we can facilitate those introductions and that communication. If you're willing to help us put the word out on the need for poll workers, again, every county needs the help. So some of you are very much Los Angeles based. Los Angeles County needs the help, and clearly we're the largest voting jurisdiction in America. But it's not just Los Angeles County. Some of you have a footprint that extends beyond the county or the metropolitan area, and that's fine too, because whether it's Orange County, San Diego, the Bay Area, Sacramento, all the way up to the Oregon border, counties need your assistance. So I wanted to take this opportunity to make that appeal to all of you and kind of wrap up my presentation with that. That's the overview of what to expect for November as voters. And, you know, if those of you who are able and willing to help us in the actual administration of our democracy, what better year to do it in than this unprecedented year. You know, we came into 2020 knowing this would be the most consequential election of our lifetime for so many reasons, and it's only become more so given the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And frankly, I'd be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge the movement that has come since the killing of George Floyd, and frankly, others before him, calling for more justice in all areas of our society. So regardless of your political leanings, we know elections are important, a lot at stake this year, including the very strength and health of our fundamental democracy. So that's the business I'm in, and with your help, we'll make sure California continues to strengthen its small d democratic muscles. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. And as we reflect on how lucky we are to be in California, and with you as our Secretary of State and Governor Newsom as our governor, before I go to the questions, I want to ask you a question, and that is, you're part of the National Association of Secretaries of State. You're in the middle of your forum right now. Can you just give us some insight about how the rest of the country is stacking up compared to us, and what your thoughts are about, you know, maybe what the good news and the challenges might be for the November election?
Sure. Yeah. So for those of you who I know we had in our virtual green room before we started,
Yes.
We're having a little chatter about the National Association of Secretaries of State, of which I'm a member, where we come together across the aisle to exchange ideas and best practices, see how we can help each other get better at what we do. You know, and for years there was a lot of conversation about you know, innovations in voter registration or things like that. The last 4 years, it's been a lot about election security, right? It was just 4 years ago, about this time, we first started hearing chatter about foreign interference and, you know, cyber threats to our elections infrastructure. And those have continued and continue to evolve. And so I'm taking a time out from that conference to be with you right now. And as soon as I finish, I'm going to hop back on, because our next session is election security information exchange workshop among those secretaries. But look, as proud as I am that California is where we are, I think now more a leader on a national level than we have been in the past. I am encouraged by the collaboration by most secretaries. I wish I could say all, but I'm proud to at least say most on both sides of the aisle, trying to do the right thing by voters for this November's election. You know, sadly, I think this is the challenge in other states where they haven't had as much experience with vote by mail, for example. Sometimes it's been intentional, sometimes it hasn't, but for whatever the reasoning is, there's some states that have very minimal vote by mail experience. Most claim to have a vote by mail option, but in a lot of states, it's very restricted. You know, there's a very narrow list of excuses that qualify you to vote by mail. Otherwise, you have to show up in person, which we know isn't always the most convenient, especially for working folks or anybody who lives in an area with a long commute or congested traffic or both. You know, getting to the polls on election day can be tough. And so vote by mail is both convenient and proven to be successful and secure. And so I think not a day goes by that I'm not on the phone with one of my colleagues from around the country to talk about how we do it in California. And, it's not just a surface level. We'll send out ballots and have them return and count them. But things like signature verification, right? One of the important safeguards to protect the integrity of our election. Or one of the things that we've done, even though we have a strong foundation on vote by mail in California, post-primary, we surveyed every single county and said, what would it take for you to go from where you are? Could be 70%, could be 50% vote by mail to 100. Are you going to need staffing? Are you going to need infrastructure and equipment? Can we help with training? What's going to be the fiscal impact of that in preparation with plenty of time before November? It's the same exercise that a lot of states are doing now. Thankfully, California is ahead of the game when it comes to public understanding, right? The voter education part of the voting by mail, or just changing how we're conducting elections. In other states, they're kind of starting from scratch. And so, again, helping with them with what's been more effective messaging and communication strategies for us here in California, as they're significantly ramping up in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Ohio. We're hoping in Connecticut and Rhode Island as well, just truly across the board.
Let me ask you, we have a couple questions here. No, that was really helpful, and we're praying that everybody certifies their election in every state and relatively on time. Is that correct?
No, that's going to be a real challenge, because with the, in California, we know that, look, for most contests, we'll have a pretty good sense on election night of the outcome, or at least, the winners.
Right.
But for close races, it's going to take a while because the system is built on taking extra time to get it right.
Yeah.
Vote by mail ballots that are postmarked on or before election day, but we give it extra time to arrive. We're actually extending that time this November because of potential impacts to the Postal Service. We've heard about their financial struggles right now, things like that. So getting the general public and especially the press ready for, we'll have a good sense come election night, but we may not have final numbers for a while. And so how do we build in that patience and understanding for a few days, if not a few weeks? And that actually touches on something else. If there's one thing that does keep me up at night, it's how we counter whether it's misinformation or disinformation about elections that will run rampant once again on social media. And look, I'm not trying to be partisan here, but I think everybody will acknowledge there's a certain occupant of the Oval Office that continues to attack vote by mail, and in so doing is undermining confidence, not just in vote by mail, but our elections overall. So not to drag us into that fight, but just to let you know that as California Secretary of State, I will correct the record at every turn and provide voters the official, reliable information they deserve to know about how to participate in the election in the way that they best prefer, whether it's in person or by mail.
Right. So remind us, this signature verification that goes with the mail-in ballots and the voting in person, then our elections are certified by you as the Secretary of State. And then in order for the Electoral College to say, pick a new president, all the states have to be certified, right?
Right. So it's, after the primary in March, COVID impacted pretty much the following week, the stay-at-home orders, physical distancing directives, et cetera. So we were in a good position to grant counties additional time to finish their processing of ballots and conducting their post-election audits, right? That's required of every county after every election. We're not going to have that luxury after November. We're going to have counties wrap up that required work in the 4-week time period that's in statute because of the Electoral College timelines that we need to meet. But I'm sure we will. We've been working in preparation with every county hand in hand, and we'll get the job done. Good.
Okay. So back here in California, we have some questions. What do you think, what are the efforts that are being made, particularly in disadvantaged communities of color, to protect voting rights and reduce voter intimidation or suppression ahead of the 2020 election?
Right. No, look, I appreciate the question. And, while, again, we're lucky that we're in California and not in places where that activity continues to persist, unfortunately. Places like Alabama. We've seen images of Georgia and Florida, and far too many locations where people still struggle, not just to register to vote, but to stay registered on and stay on the rolls, or have decreasing opportunities for how to cast their ballot. The impact of voter ID, just on and on and on. So in California, we're not perfect. We're constantly vigilant and have to continue to work at it, but it's a heck of a lot easier here in California. I think the biggest challenge and opportunity that we have is not just increasing registration numbers in communities where historically registration has been lower. We've been doing a good job of that through tools like online and automatic registration. But it's also, in addition to affording the additional opportunities to vote, whether it's by mail, early voting, that sort of thing, or the flexibility on election day, the biggest challenge has been voter education, right? Because all these additional options are not very beneficial if people are not aware of them. So now it's a combination of things like transitioning to the Voters' Choice Act, to what other unique changes we're making for this November because of COVID. So thankfully, the legislature did approve a modest but a budget for voter education and outreach through my office. So we're going to split that source of funding with all the counties and work together to reach out, whether it's through traditional media, social media. I'm going to shock you, Mary. We developed the ability in the Secretary of State's office to email every voter in California that has shared an email address with us. People think email, that's not revolutionary, but we didn't even have that in place when I came in. And we're able to do it without ending up in too many spam folders or junk boxes.
Also, I'm noticing that a lot of broadcasters appear to have a lot of ad time at the moment, since we're not selling a lot of cars and there is no sports and fairly beer commercials are down. So perhaps the PSA potential will be higher.
Right. Although, Dodgers opening day is this Thursday.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Nobody in the stands. But I think it is, as tough as it is out there, right? There's a lot of people who are suffering. I don't mean to diminish that. My heart goes out to them.
Yeah.
But right now, whether it's people who still have to work, but when they get home, they're watching the news more than before, or those of us who are privileged enough to be able to work from home are watching news more than ever before. So folks are paying attention.
Yeah,
and we need to take advantage of that to educate folks about the changes to anticipate for this November.
Okay, this is hot off the press. Okay, the president apparently has signed a memo today to prevent undocumented immigrants from being counted in the U.S. Census. Could you comment on this and what this will mean for democracy in California? And will this impact this election or future elections?
Yeah. First of all, it's BS. It's unconstitutional.
Yeah.
He knows that. So what this is going to turn into is a big waste of time, energy, and taxpayer dollars, unfortunately, because there will be litigation on it. Look, this has been litigated over the years. There's plenty of case law in place. The Constitution is clear. The Supreme Court just last year, right, defeated the Trump effort to question the citizenship of every person in America.
Yeah.
It's frankly his personal political agenda, his dog whistle to his base. It's not going to impact elections, that's for sure. And I don't think in the long term it's going to impact redistricting and future elections in the way that he'd love to see. But in the meantime, we'll have to, fight it through policy, fight it through the courts, and fight it through public education. Because look, let me take this opportunity to remind everybody, I'm sure everybody on this call has already participated in the census. In case you haven't, or know folks who haven't, there is still time. You can do it online at my2020census.gov. You can go there, and that also includes the various phone numbers to participate by phone if that's your preference, including the number of languages other than English, if that's how some of our friends and neighbors choose to participate. Or you can fill out the form that has come to your home if you haven't participated already. We know how critical the census is.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before, federal funding, representation in Congress, right? But at the end of the day, it's constitutionally required. The Constitution says every 10 years there shall be a national population count, not a national citizen count, not a national voter count, not even a national adult count. And I mentioned that because 10 years ago, the biggest undercounted population was children under 5. So make sure we count everybody in your household, including friends or extended family who may be living with you at this tough time.
Well, we certainly can't complain about our allocation of federal resources if we're not willing to fill out our census forms, right?
Imagine that, more federal funding without raising taxes.
Correct.
That's what the census
Yeah, if
means.
you want more money, fill out your census form. But let me ask you a question. Are you helping other states with mail-in ballots? And do you expect any kind of legal challenge here in California on the system?
So we are helping other states, those that call upon us to pick our brains and tap
Right.
our experience, which is a whole lot of them. And that's been great because this is important for our fundamental democracy. Legal challenges, probably not a week goes by, but we've already been sued. Other states that are just now acting to expand vote by mail for the general election are being faced with lawsuits. We got ours a couple months ago. Both the state Republican Party and the national Republican Party sued the governor, sued myself, and others for the audacity to make it so that voters don't have to choose between exercising their right to vote and protecting their health and that of their loved ones. Just last week, they quietly withdrew the litigation. So, good news for voters. We never had any doubt. Again, it was a distraction, a waste of resources, but planning and preparation continues.
Right. Plus, it required a lot of COVID denial, which apparently it's hard to maintain at this point. So,
right. The numbers are spiking. And so, from the beginning, I chose to listen to Dr. Fauci. One of two things is going to happen. Come November, one of two things. Either we will not have flattened the curve yet. Because here we are. It's mid-July. We still haven't flattened the curve. Or even if we do. Even if we do.
On whether he throws the first ball out in New York.
Even if we can flatten the curve statewide or locally, until there's a vaccine, there's going to be risk. And so, we built those assumptions into our preparations for November, and clearly it was the right call.
Okay, so this is a good question. I'm going to shout out her name. Maureen Kendall is asking this question, who I know you know. She's saying, will there be appropriate protective dress and behavior for in-person voting? And it'd be wonderful if the authorities could provide the basics such as masks, hand sanitizer, gloves. Is all that going to be assured? And if this is not possible, perhaps organizations could mobilize and provide these. So what's the basic safety going to be out of a polling place?
So that's a great question. Appreciate Maureen and your not just your Facebook friendship, but your friendship for many, many years. And the answer is yes. We're built that into our plans and preparation. Again, having convened since mid-March with all of our stakeholders, we knew that we needed to ensure that counties not just printed enough ballots and envelopes and had staffing and training, but that we have to work together to secure gloves and masks and sanitizer and all of the typical PPE that public health officials are going to require. I'll tell you how far we went to do homework. Back in March and April, it wasn't just other primary elections happening around the country, but there was also elections being held in other countries, including Israel and South Korea. So through the National Association of Secretaries of State, we actually held Zoom conferences with representatives of those countries to talk through their election day protocols during a pandemic to see what we can pull as best practices to incorporate here. So look, between now and November, we're going to encourage people to the extent possible, vote by mail, vote by mail, vote by mail. But for folks who do need to go in person, be prepared. Masks will be required. We'll have sanitizer on hand, 6 feet separation minimum. Yet another reason why we need different voting locations, right? You're not going to have 30 voting booths all side by side. We got to space them out. So we need larger facilities. So expect all the public health guidelines to be implemented at every voting location. And I'll also turn your attention to a press release we just announced today, letting it be known that we worked with state public health officials to put the bare minimum health directives in place for county elections offices. And from there, they will be supplemented by what their county public health officials will advise between now and November. So yes, were on it. And I guess the best way to explain it is what we saw in Wisconsin a couple of months ago, we took as a warning, did not accept that as a preview of what to see in November, as a warning of what to avoid.
Could happen, yeah. And do you feel like when people do go in, whatever glitches or the new machines and all that will have been worked out? There's some questions about that. Do you feel like there's any, we had, our learning curve has been sufficiently tested now and they'll be smoother? Yes.
I do believe so, you know, and I think what you're referring to is specifically the Los Angeles County issues in the primary election. So just to put it in context, look, 58 counties in California and 57, the primary went smooth. 15 counties that have adopted the Voters' Choice Act, and 14 of the 15, things went pretty smooth. The exception was Los Angeles County. And yes, it was partially due to the new voting system. Not the ballot marking devices specifically. What's a post-election review has uncovered is the biggest roadblock or bottleneck, I should say, was really the check-in system. When the systems were used to check voters in, weren't being synced very quickly. That created the delays. Once people got past that and went into the voting experience, for the most part, it was pretty good. And so the other significant difference for Los Angeles County is they decided to set up the vote center model where any voter can go anywhere, but they did not mail every voter a ballot, every registered voter a ballot in advance. And as we've seen in the rest of the state, and as we've seen in other states, the system works best when both pieces are in place. Every voter gets their ballot in the mail in advance, and they have the options of which vote center they'd like to go to in person to drop off their ballot or to vote a fresh ballot. LA County didn't do that in advance. I called for it right after the primary. The Board of Supervisors acted on that. And then, of course, the governor and the legislature said we're going to do that for the whole state. So I think we'll be much better prepared for November.
No, I think you've done an amazing job, you know, particularly for people who work and have odd hours and everything else. Creating that flexibility was critical. Making it more dispersed was critical, and allowing people to do it when they could do it and giving them some time. And you're right, you get your ballot early, you have to look at it. So maybe you're more prepared when you walk in.
Right. No, that's a big plus for a lot of people, whether they're conscious of it or not. When you get the ballot at home, you can take your time, think it through, ask your questions, and heaven forbid, talk to your family members or your neighbors or your friends. How are you voting on this one? And not have to worry about taking that extra time once you're in the voting booth and feel the stress of people lining up behind you waiting to do the same.
Right. Well, I always get to that section on judges and I just kind of gloss over, you know, so unless I have a prior conversation, it's kind of rough in that section. Not quite sure who all those judges are exactly. But this is what I think, you know, we need to get you back to cybersecurity because I don't want you to miss that. And I want to make sure that we send this to, we have 12,000 people in our database. We'll send your Democracy at Work to them, and we'll push this out over the next couple of weeks. And I'm hoping everybody on this call will participate, because I think this is exactly how you get people to register and actually vote when it's a value in the culture where you work. So I want to thank you for that, and let you get back to your important work. And we're grateful that you took the time with us today, and we look forward to working with you, Secretary.
Thank you, Mary.
For so many years, and you do great work. And
thanks for having me. Stay tuned to the announcements coming out of our office, and if there's an interest, you know, happy to come back before the November election.
We might take you up on that, because no doubt we'll have more questions by then. Okay. All right.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Okay, so now I'm going to go briefly to Adam Lane, our VP of Program. He's going to give us an update on legislation. Adam?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. We figured we'd give you all an update on the ballot measures, since that fits so well with today's conversation, since the Secretary of State does qualify those ballot measures. But November election's not going to be just exciting and consequential because of the candidates, but there's also a multitude of ballot measures that we're expecting to see and have to vote on. As you know, in general elections, especially when it's a presidential year, there tends to be very high turnout, and thus people, both publicly and local and state legislators, tend to put on several ballot measures, expecting that it's more likely and favorable for items to pass. So this year's no different. Right now at the state level, there are 12 qualified ballot measures with several that are pending through the process. They cover a wide range of topics from medical research to the voting age to consumer privacy laws, but there are a few key items that we want to bring up that are key to our membership and core areas to the LA Business Council. The first one I want to mention is Prop 15. It is the California Schools and Local Communities Funding Act of 2020, which is also known as split roll. The measure would essentially remove part of the Prop 13 property tax limits on commercial and industrial property. So specifically, it would increase funding for K through 12 public schools, community colleges, and local governments by about $7.5 to $12 billion annually by requiring that commercial and industrial real property be taxed on their current market value. So there are exemptions to this ballot measure. It does not apply to residential properties, only commercial industrial. It does not apply to agricultural properties, and owners of commercial and industrial properties with a combined value of $3 million or less are also exempt from the real property calculation. 40% of this funding is going to go to schools, and 60% would go to local governments. It would be phased in 2022, leading up to, I believe, about 2025 and 26. There's also Prop 21, which is the Rental Affordability Act. After failing in 2018 to roll back Costa-Hawkins via the ballot, this is Michael Weinstein's second effort to bring back rent control statewide, or to at least pull back the protections for rent control. So Prop 21 would amend state law to allow local governments to establish rent control on residential properties up to 15 years old, over 15 years old, excuse me. And it allows rent increases on rent-controlled property up to 15% over 3 years from previous tenants' rent, and any increase allowed by local state ordinance. It does exempt individuals who own no more than 2 homes from the new policies. We also have Prop 22, which would be the partial repeal of AB 5, which, if many of you all remember, passed in the state legislature a couple of years ago, and it classified many independent contractors as full-time employees. This was a highly controversial measure that passed the state. The initiative would essentially create a carve-out for app-based drivers to be classified as independent workers and not employees or agents. So it would define app-based drivers as workers who provide delivery services on a demand platform or application, and those who use their personal vehicle to provide free-range transportation services. So it's very much developed to impact the Lyfts and Ubers and food delivery services like Postmates and DoorDash. So it does not apply to any of the other industries in which AB 5 put those classified as employees. And lastly, at the state, we're very much excited about Prop 16, which is the Opportunity for All Act. It came out of ACA 5, which passed this year in the legislature. This Opportunity for All Act would undo Proposition 209, for those of you who remember, which banned the consideration of race and gender in public employment, contracting, and education. If passed, it would allow California and local governments to join 42 other states and the federal government to operate programs that provide access to equal opportunity and economic development. We're particularly excited about this because for the past 3 years, on an initiative we've been working on for the past 3 years, we had a recent win at LA City Council when the city voted to adopt a complete transformation and upgrade of their antiquated procurement system into one that is modern and regional and increases access for local, small, and diverse businesses. So if we can successfully repeal Prop 209 and the city and proprietary departments start putting in specific set-asides and programs for diverse-owned businesses, the platform would essentially provide a tool to connect these small, medium, and large businesses with contracting opportunities. Then at the local level, LAUSD is reviving a bond originally intended to be placed on the March ballot. It's aimed at retrofitting and modernizing school buildings. This will be a $9 billion bond. It was just heard by the LAUSD board, I believe last week. And it would be to seismic retrofit schools, upgrade building systems and safety equipment, to replace aging equipment and facilities, and it would provide 21st century learning technologies. So currently the school has about $50 billion in unfunded needs, which includes about 500 school buildings, 38,000 HVAC units, and 450 schools needing accessibility upgrades. This bond measure would put a major dent in that $50 billion. And it's part of an ongoing series of bonds the school has passed, the most recent one being 2008, which was Measure Q. So there are many other ballot measures that are currently attempting to be placed on the ballot, whether local or at the state. We'll continue to update you all via our weekly digest. that Rachel Levy and our communications team put together. And then for our members, we'll continue to update you at our Legislative Affairs Committee meetings. So that's all for me. And thank you, Mary, and thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, that's great, Adam. Thank you so much for that summary. Those are important statewide initiatives. And I just want to plug two things before we go. Tuesday, July 28th, as Adam just said, the city is updating its procurement system, and we're going to have key participants, Councilman Curran Price, City Controller Ron Galperin, Chief Procurement Officer Shannon Papes, and either, I think, Councilman Paul Krikorian or his staff person will be with us. And that will be specifically about this new program, about the funding they just passed for it. It should be up and running, we hope, in the next 8 months. So don't miss that. Tuesday, July 28th. And then last but not least, August 6th, we'll have with us Monica Garcia from LA City Council, who will be talking about Pacoima and the San Fernando Valley with Department of Water and Power discussing solar. So don't miss these two. You'll see them in our digest or go to the website. Thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you.